Great, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's product release webinar, introducing the underwriting clearance and triage solution. My name is Jeremy Stinson. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Indico Data, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items to walk through. So this webinar will be recorded and sent out to everyone within 24 hours of the presentation. Attendees will be muted during the webinar, and then we'll accept questions live at the end. You can also submit questions during the webinar, and we'll answer them at the end using the Q&A function right there on the window that you see on the slide. But yeah, definitely please ask questions. We want this to be engaging. We want to make sure we get to everyone's questions throughout the webinar today. And now I'm thrilled to introduce our fantastic lineup of speakers. First, we have Tom Wild, our CEO at Indico Data. Tom has been instrumental in shaping our vision and driving our continued innovation within the insurance industry. Joining him is Bill Devine, an industry advisor and former senior vice president at Travelers. Bill brings a wealth of experience and insight, having been on the front lines of insurance decision-making for many years. And finally, we have John Endell, our senior solutions consultant. John will lead us through a demonstration of our new solution, bringing to life the capabilities we're excited to share with you all today. Now let's take a look at the agenda. We'll kick things off with a panel discussion where Tom and Bill will share their perspectives on how the industry is evolving. After that, we'll dive into an overview of our clearance and triage solution. Then John will take over for a product demonstration, and lastly, we'll end with a Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. So for the next 15 minutes or so, panel discussion Indico is calling the decision era. This conversation will set the stage for why we launched our underwriting clearance and triage solution. It also marks Indico's evolution in our positioning from being solely focused on unstructured data extraction and ingestion to providing technology that empowers insurers to make faster, more informed decisions throughout the policy lifecycle. So to start, we want to talk about how over the past few decades, technology has evolved through distinct eras that have transformed business. It began with the software revolution where, as Mark Andreessen predicted, software would eat the world, digitizing processes everywhere. Then came the cloud era with platforms like AWS and Azure turning data storage into a utility, followed by the data era, which emphasized data as a critical asset through innovations like data lakes. Now we're entering the decision era, where we believe organizations need to take the next step and act on all this data they've accumulated and make that data actionable with AI, unlocking new decision-making power. So this first question I'll send to you, Tom. How can insurers shift the organizational mindset to prioritize data-informed decisioning to gain a competitive edge?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy, and happy to be here today. I think the key here is, we've gone through this period of really focusing on collecting, cleansing, amassing data. I don't think anyone needs to be convinced that they need a data strategy anymore, whether you're an insurance company or a bank or even your local landscape company. Everybody has data of some kind that they're using for a competitive advantage. I think that there's been a sort of so what question though. What has all this activity around data given us from an ROI perspective? And that's really this notion that we're at a moment in time where compute, data, AI allows us suddenly to unlock and capture the ROI we've been trying to.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Maybe on a related note for you, Bill, a lot of people have said that insurance companies have historically been laggards when it comes to tech adoption. What advice do you have for carriers to set themselves up to be front runners in this next era?
Yeah, so similar to Tom, thanks for including me today, Jeremy. I'm excited to be able to be part of this and have a voice in this conversation, because I do think it's important, and I do think it's a really interesting time for carriers. I think your comment about laggard is very true, but the reasons that it's very true may not always be what the reason that people expect, right? So as you put the technology evolution up here, insurance companies overall have actually been at the forefront of a lot of these different eras. So whether it was the SaaS offerings or cloud era or different things, definitely been leading edge in a lot of those. But that also means that then we've got a lot of legacy, right? And when you have a lot of legacy technology and a lot of legacy culture, it's incredibly challenging. And I think part of our legacy culture as an industry that we've developed is a predilection for building things ourselves, right? So because the farther left side of your technology evolution chart, insurance was cutting edge. We were also very much into, as an industry, build it ourselves. And so I think, as carriers want to accelerate right on this continuum, it's really figuring out how to partner, how to bring other folks to the table and not just try to build everything ourselves.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And so I think this next slide sort of summarizes what we've all been saying here. So after significant investments in data storage, cleansing, and transformation, the focus is shifting. What was the purpose of all of this? How can we achieve ROI from the data we've collected? And how do we unlock its full potential? This is really the essence of the decision era. This next question for you, Bill, what are the most significant risks that insurers face in decision making, and how can AI help mitigate these risks?
Yeah, I think going back to kind of my comment on the prior question, Jeremy, it's because we have been in the data and the information game for so long, we've as an industry have potentially massive accumulations of data at this point. I think the challenge is how much of that data is actionable, how much of that data is usable, right? So when you think about the history of Indico and some of the work around unstructured data, that when you look across the insurance carriers and insurance industry as a whole, we have unbelievable amounts of data because making data-driven decisions has been in the DNA of the industry. But I think the flip side of that is that that just means we have massive amounts of data, and to be able to get through it all intelligently and to use it is something that's a challenge now and is going to be a challenge for time to come. And that's where I think AI and different AI tools are going to be critical for navigating through this morass.
Yeah, it's a good point. It does feel a bit daunting when you think about the mass amounts of data we've collected over the past years. And maybe this follow-up question for you, Tom, will help folks feel a bit better about this. How do you think AI-enhanced decisioning can translate to better outcomes for carriers? What are some of the benefits Indico customers are seeing today?
Yeah, building on Bill's point, I think the winners here are going to be determined by those that, at a very high level, succeed in two categories. One is for those that have done a good job amassing and cleansing data and have, sort of quote unquote, the good ground truth as to what their data represents. They're well set up for AI because AI is still very much a garbage in, garbage out equation. I think though the sub bullet to that is that for the most part, companies have not been prepared to leverage their unstructured data assets and make them sort of first-class citizens to their structured data assets. All of a sudden now with generative AI and other developments in AI, we can do that. And your ability to take advantage of what's primarily documents, right? When we talk about unstructured data, we're generally talking about the millions of documents sitting in file stores that have been traditionally sort of dark data. Maybe there was some enterprise search you could apply to it, but beyond that, it wasn't really useful at providing context for decisioning. Those things are going to be critical sort of base requirements to take advantage of the developments in AI. If you have those, the second big category here is going to be how you intelligently apply AI to your decisioning. That's what we're going to be talking about in quite a bit of detail on the webinar today.
Yeah, and just to add to what Tom you were saying there, I think this idea of like we've had tremendous amounts of unstructured data, and historically unstructured data has been effective for evaluating a single risk. But I think what's exciting and what we're going to be talking about is the ability to be able to mine that data to do more around building models and doing things much more at a portfolio at a company level and not just individual risk.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think that the notion of sort of longitudinal analysis that you can now do, including unstructured, is a huge opportunity. That's a great point.
Yeah, and really, I think leads us nicely to the next slide here around, how do we think about taking advantage of this mass amounts of data? What is sort of the process we should go through and think about how to take advantage and make all this actionable? Really for us, we feel like the new enterprise mandate is to think about decisioning as a supply chain metaphor with parallels to the manufacturing process. And so in this metaphor, data, whether first party, second party, third party, structured or unstructured, acts as that raw material. undergoing steps of ingestion, classification, validation, and enhancement to build intelligence. So Tom, a question for you. This metaphor sounds great, but can you give a practical example or use case of putting this framing into work at a carrier?
Yeah, I think what we witnessed early on with applying AI to unstructured data ingestion in particular was the new requirement that this explainability concept was going to become really mission critical. The regulators are generally a couple of years behind the market, but they're catching up quickly and putting new requirements and burdens on people using AI, specifically carriers in the insurance industry. So this idea that originally with AI, there was a black box sort of approach, and vendors and technology providers would say to the customers, yeah, don't worry about it. We've perfected this black box and you just put data in and we give you data back. And no one could really provide true explanation or explainability for that. So that was something we focused on early in our journey, was building explainability into the process. It's why that we've seen this evolution towards the supply chain metaphor be quite viable, because if you look at the steps that you go through to go from raw material to decision, there's many steps inside of that, and your ability to provide the provenance of each of those steps to create an explainability solution is really important. So when I think about our large customers doing underwriting submission ingestion, which is still dominated by unstructured data, they're able to, quote unquote, at the click of a mouse, diagnose the performance of the steps in this process and share that with internal compliance folks and external regulators. Certainly, internal compliance is well ahead of the regulators. We have to, on a regular basis now, assist our customers in filling out model risk statements for internal compliance. If we hadn't built explainability into the platform, that would be a really tedious process, because our customers are able to provide that information efficiently to their internal compliance folks. And that's what allows them to continue to operate this in production. Without that, you would see them having to shut down parts of their AI deployments because they can't provide the explainability.
Yeah, it's a good point, Tom. Maybe building on that, a question for you, Bill. If we look at the last step in the supply chain metaphor, it's AI plus human in the loop. Can you talk a bit about the importance of ensuring that AI and human collaboration?
Yeah, so a mentor of mine early in my career talked about the fact that every underwriter's desk was like a cottage industry. It was as artisan as operational, and so that's where I think that the metaphor that you've got here holds really well all the way until the final step, at least the way the commercial lines industry operates today. Like you go to the floor in Lloyd's, I know, Tom, you were just in London, you go to the floor in Lloyd's, and each desk is run by an individual underwriter who brings their knowledge, their experience to the decision on the individual risk. And so I think what's incredibly important is that we respect that, and we respect the tradition in that. And so while going left to right, that the ability to bring AI to the decision-making process is incredibly powerful. Kind of going right to left, we have to really take into account that at the end of the day, insurance is a transaction handled between a broker and an underwriter, and I don't see a future where that goes away anytime soon, particularly when we get to large, complex, heterogeneous risks. So human in the loop is an incredibly important part of, I think, the entirety of this, but becomes even more significant the further right you get in this kind of decision supply chain.
Yeah, Jeremy, I often describe this as lowercase a automation versus uppercase A automation, meaning maybe somewhere in the future there's sort of full automation of critical processes like this, but for the moment and looking out probably 5 to 10 years, that's not realistic. What is realistic is automating steps in the process to accelerate and facilitate the subject matter experts that ultimately are the keys to good decisioning here. And so this human in the loop is where that's going to happen. Whether you call it a co-pilot or a bionic arm, that is the right way to think about automation in these processes for the foreseeable future. And you've even heard this recently from folks like, Mark Benioff talking about Salesforce Agentic AI and saying that, there's no near-term future where human in the loop isn't an absolute requirement to make sure these decisions are made both at scale, but also with accuracy. And we would add to that with explainability.
Yeah, and that actually is a great segue into our next slide, where we can double click on the topic of AI a bit. It wouldn't feel right if we didn't, I suppose. So, over the years, AI has really evolved through waves similar to programming languages with distinct strengths. So on the left-hand side of the slide there, you can see, starting with predictive machine learning, we then progressed to discriminative AI with deep learning and transformers, which unlocked understanding of language, speech, and images. And then generative AI expanded those capabilities with massive models. And now agentic AI is emerging, orchestrating these advancements to enable AI systems to take initiative and make complex context-aware decisions on their own. So a question for you, Tom: how should carriers think about the waves of AI that we've gone through? Does each one replace the last? Do they build upon one another? How should we be thinking about this?
Yeah, and you can even see on the slide here, it's sort of represented loosely as sort of puzzle pieces. And I think that's correct. I don't think it's correct to sort of think of each wave as replacing all previous waves. It's a much better concept to think about these as individual programming languages, right? Each with its own strengths and weaknesses. The big transition that AI has brought to the software industry is we're able to program with data, number one, rather than code. And number two, we're able to now program with natural language rather than sort of machine instruction. Those are profound changes in the market. But what you find is that each of these has its own particular strengths and weaknesses. If I just pick a couple, a lot of what goes on in insurance requires a very deterministic outcome, right? You can't have a probabilistic prediction. So things like discriminative AI are very useful because discriminative cannot hallucinate, right? It is only able to produce from the data that it's received explicitly. Now, on the other hand, things like summarization, summarizing a medical records package in the life insurance industry, summarizing things like loss runs, very useful to accelerate the underwriting or claims process, and you need generative AI to do that. Generative AI is a probabilistic approach, a stochastic approach that has some range of accuracy and error, but it is incredibly good at things like summarization if the right guardrails are put in place and the right understanding that, hey, this is not a deterministic outcome. There may be possibilities for error there. And then of course agentic, thinking about that more as the orchestration, AI orchestration, which can combine all of these things, and even beyond these things can combine rules engines and heuristics to reach an outcome. So I think it's this is much more a composition of programming languages you use to solve particular problems.
Yeah, maybe Bill, building off of what Tom said, how can carriers understand what AI tech is right for the use case at hand with so many options available to them today?
This is horrible. We're going to just keep quoting Mark Benioff today, but I think there was a point that he made in his keynote at Dreamforce this year that really is applicable here, where he talked about the fact that companies like Salesforce, like Indico, are going to be developing tools in these spaces, and that companies should think more in the terms of consumption and less in the terms of development. Having been part of initiatives during Wave 1 and Wave 2, I can attest to the fact that as a carrier, we were building things in machine learning that now are commodities that can be bought for fractions of the investment and the expense. I think carriers understanding how all of these things work incredibly well, but then just using that more to be an informed consumer far more than being the one who's selecting, whether agentic AI or discriminative AI is the right tool. It should be more around what are the capabilities that you need to advance your business, and how can you take those building blocks and bring them to your processes and the things that actually make you as a carrier differentiated in the marketplace and actually improve that underlying strength, as opposed to everyone trying to rush to become a tech company and all of the challenges that come with that. So Tom, I think we've quoted Benioff twice in 20 minutes, which is
that's right. I mean, I think there's the newest sort of meme in enterprise technology is service as a software instead of software as a service. But I think it's real. I think the idea that you'd have to put together a lot of piece parts to aid automation, like we saw with the early efforts that RPA brought to the table, I think are being replaced now by this idea that instead of licensing technology, you're licensing specific solutions. So if we think about underwriting, can you license underwriting service as software and plug in your subject matter experts, plug in your unique enterprise data, plug in your unique risk algorithms to that to accelerate the process. I think that's really exciting. It's very early days, but I think that is where this is heading, and you can kind of see that starting to replicate across the different industries. But I think the idea that you're going to want to be licensing services from companies that deeply understand the use case that you're experiencing as a customer, rather than purely horizontal capabilities pitches. We're at the beginning of that, but I think that's kind of a no looking back moment here. I think that only a small number of horizontal technology players are going to be able to build businesses, and that it really is limited to probably the big hyperscalers and maybe a couple of the horizontal platforms beyond that. But I think this idea of service as software is here to stay, and it's going to be use case and industry specific.
Well, thank you both. That was really good context, I think, for what's to come throughout the rest of the webinar. I'm now going to turn it over to Tom to introduce the technology that powers our new solution, as well as the features and functionality before moving on to a live product demonstration. So Tom, I will hand it over to you.
Great, awesome, thanks, Jeremy. So we began our journey as a company with our intake solution, and we think of that as the better data proposition here in the market. And as we started out the conversation, the rise of AI has shown a really bright light on the need to have excellent data to be able to take advantage of AI and ultimately lead to what we think is the punchline, which is better decisions. So the market's most familiar with our intelligent intake solution that we've been developing for the last 10 years, honestly, beginning with one of the very first large language models to be deployed in production inside the corporate firewall, which we developed about 6 years ago around a discriminative AI stack, and have had that in market, in deployment with some huge logos, delivering a solution for dealing with the river of unstructured data that every insurance carrier deals with day in, day out, whether you're talking about underwriting submissions, claim submissions. They are dominated by unstructured data, predominantly documents. And Indico has developed, a very best-in-class solution for doing that. However, customers in the last sort of 2 years, year to 2 years, have been saying to us, well, what about two things? The lake of sort of legacy unstructured data that we haven't unlocked, and second, the ability to analyze data on a more persistent basis. To sort of echo Bill's point, which I really loved, which is not just analyzing data on a risk by risk basis, but analyzing data longitudinally across a body of submissions, be they claims or underwriting, to get new intelligence from that. And so we launched our Intelligent Insights platform here, which delivers the better decision promise that customers have been looking for. These are companion products. They're designed to work out of the box together to deliver on that decision supply chain promise that we think is so compelling in the market. Now, the Intelligent Insight platform brings to life a set of exciting new technologies that we're going to demo to you in a moment here, including Agentic AI, our new agent studio for building extractive agents, summarization agents, and others. The Indico Next Best Action agents, which again, if I think about lowercase a automation, help the user process and move along the decision steps faster, but always having control over those decisions at all times and transparency into those decisions. So these were really those were the drivers from us launching Intelligent Insights, which we announced at ITC in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, seems like a month ago now. And on top of that, building the first of many of our point solutions, this one being the underwriting triage solution, which we're going to demonstrate for you later in the webinar here. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about this point, quote unquote, point solution we're bringing to market on the top of our two technology initiatives, Intelligent Intake and Intelligent Insights. We zeroed in on triage with our customers based on their feedback, really driven by a couple things. I think broadly, triage matters. It allows you to underwrite the right risk at the right price, as quickly as possible, and be competitive in the market. Speed to quote, is generally one of the most important things in underwriting. And you could even say, speed to adjudication on the claim side as well. So those have always been important to carriers. However, we've been in a hard market now for several years. I mean, I think based on the Reuters quote at the bottom of the slide, something like 7 years we've been in a hard market. And in a hard market, it's just not as critical to be able to efficiently understand the river of submissions you're getting. You can basically hit your targets for your GWP without a ton of effort. It favors the carriers. It is a carrier focused market when you're in a hard market, which we've been in. When we move to a soft market, this changes dramatically. So I'll kind of walk through some of the key takeaways of what happens in a soft market. And I think many believe that 2025 we're going to enter the beginning of a soft market period here. So let's start with the volume of submissions, meaning how many submissions do you have to evaluate successfully and in a timely manner to meet your GWP goals. In a hard market, you don't really have to aggressively go after that river of submissions. And indeed, in a hard market, what you'll see is carriers may be quoting 20% of the submissions, 20 to 30% of overall submissions. That's kind of shocking, I think, for people outside the insurance industry. The idea that 80% of the people who are asking to do business with you, you won't get at, right? You don't have the resources or the bandwidth to do it, and more importantly, you don't need to do it. In a soft market, that changes dramatically. You need to be able to access that full river of submissions much more efficiently because you're going to have to assess and quote a much larger percentage of that submission river to hit the same goals that you had in a hard market. Price competition becomes much more intense. That means that being able to triage the actual risk you're trying to quote against and ones that you think you're going to be able to win, given your pricing and risk strategy, become important. And so that means you have to be more efficient at picking through that submission river to find the risks that you can win. Profitability, I think you need to prioritize those profitable accounts. You need to use the data you have historically and be able to unlock that historical data to know what profitable accounts, a profile of a profitable account looks like in the first place. Resource efficiency, you've got to be able to leverage your underwriting resources more effectively. You can't suddenly double the number of underwriters you have to get at the fact that you're going to have to triage and quote more of the submissions. You need to give them tools, co-pilots, bionic arms to take advantage of that and leverage the existing team you have. The insurance industry simply can't, flex the volume of experienced underwriters. It just doesn't exist. You can't suddenly double the number of underwriters that you have. Even if you want to, you cannot do it. Broker relationships become even more critical. So that means that you need to be able to prioritize the brokers that are most important to you, and that means better triage again to make sure you're servicing those broker relationships that really matter to you, because the brokers suddenly have more options. They can go to more of your competitors to get quotes, and they will. So really being able to provide timely service to the key broker relationships you have become a must-have. And then, of course, portfolio optimization. You probably need to tune down the selectivity dial a bit because you need to be open to a broader diversification of risk profiles to be able to, again, achieve the same underwriting goals that you had in a hard market. So the sort of takeaway here is, without using technology to leverage the skill you have in underwriting, number one, and the assets you have in the form of data, you won't be able to capture the same competitive position in a soft market that you have enjoyed in a hard market. This led us to focus on applying Indico's core AI and process technology to help our carrier customers address triage in a much more scalable and efficient manner. So when we think about this, this comes to life, in sort of this pictorial here. If historically, depending on the line of business, of course, you might be looking at 7 to 10 days to get through an underwriting process. With automation, with AI, you can reduce that to something measured in minutes or hours rather than days, and make you that much more competitive. And you can see the key pieces that get accelerated here. Again, going back to my point about sort of lowercase a automation. Monitor the email inbox automatically. Email is still the biggest mode of communication in commercial insurance. Your ability to accurately sort through these submissions coming into a central inbox is critical. Automatically detach the attachments, unbundle, extract, classify. That data is what sets up the first decision, which is, how do you prioritize what submissions to look at in the first place? Then, once you've identified the ones that you think fit your profile, how do I interpret and validate that data? Now we're talking about sort of our decisioning supply chain metaphor here, and get those in good order so you can send those to the underwriter, so that the underwriter, when that risk shows up in front of them, they have exactly what they need to efficiently quote and underwrite that risk, and thus put you in a much more advantaged position competitively, because you've used technology to accelerate and enhance what the underwriter's skill already has, and the underwriter's experience. So this is really a sort of an operational acceleration for the underwriting process, and allowing you to maintain a competitive position from hard market to soft market. And you can see, as John's going to walk through here in a moment, some of the components that we built into our insights platform that we've applied to this triage solution include queue management, so that you're working on the right risks at the right time, AI-driven next best action to help accelerate that operational component of the underwriting process, submission summarization using generative AI technologies, configurable risk scoring and policy comparison. Context is a key opportunity with Gen AI. Can you apply your underwriting risk guidelines to the risk that's in front of you? Gen AI allows you to do that, because formerly, an underwriting guideline might be a 25-page Word document. It's not a programmatic interface, but Gen AI allows us to create a proxy for that and almost make that Word document a programmatic interface that we can use in real time to assess the risk in front of us. In good order, a submission dashboard to make sure that the underwriters are only working on risks that are ready to be quoted. Ask my document or ask my submission capabilities so that I can ad hoc ask via Gen AI specific questions about the risk at hand, and ultimately, to Bill's earlier point, about the breadth of risks that I've worked on over the last week, year, month, year, et cetera. And then integrations is key. Like any industry, the big carriers live with a constellation of solutions, everything from pricing and risk engines to PASs, and so being able to integrate with those existing platforms as well as in-house platforms is an absolute must-have. Good. Well, I'm going to turn it to John now to walk us through a live demo of the product, and then we can finish with some questions at the end here. So John, over to you.
Great, thanks, Tom. And Jeremy, if you could just switch presenter over to me, that'd be great so I can share. Excellent, thank you. Let me pull that up. Great, so happy to take you through our new solution. And really what I like to lead with is really going back to that sort of that step slide that Tom just had. We really focused on a lot of just manual steps involving email. So really what we're trying to do here is take that lack of efficiency around a shared inbox like you see on my screen, and really without any ability to really understand, which emails should I prioritize, what are these emails, are they spam, are they actual submissions? And so this is typically what we're seeing at most of our customers, and this is really why we're coming up with a new solution to address this. And so that said, I'll start with our new submission inbox. And so the idea here is this is our reference app that we use to really showcase these different features and also provide a more efficient way for those teams that are working out of a shared inbox. But everything that you're going to see me show in the next few minutes can also be easily plugged into your current systems or your current dashboards via our APIs. So the submission inbox, right off the bat, you can see a lot of different fields, so you can easily customize which data do you want presented to the underwriting assistants or the ops team that's working in this particular screen. We can also really make it easy to filter and sort based on priority, based on risk appetite. So you're trying to give a lot more kind of rhyme and reason to this inbox process. Now, when I click on these, I get a nice little pop out that at a very high level shows some basic information about that submission, about the named insured. I also have a nice concise summary of what this entire submission contained, along with the email that broker sent in. Now from here, I can either use our agent that's suggesting next best action. In this case, it's saying, I don't see anything that matches, so let's go ahead and create a new submission. Alternatively, I can also associate this manually. I could say, no, this is spam. I could decline this. So a lot of different options here, but for now, what we're going to do is create this new submission. And then I'll jump right into the details of this one. So now we get a little bit of a deeper look at this particular submission that came in. So we have all of our general information. Again, as Tom mentioned, we're using our Agent Studio to easily plug in different agents to identify this information or create custom agents depending on what type of information you're looking for in this process. We can also flag particular fields. So if you want to make sure that there is data within a field that you want to mark as required, we can easily do that. Still have that summary here, and then we can list additional information such as property info or any required documents. So in this case, the first thing that you may have noticed is right up here, we have this warning that this is an incomplete, so not in good order. And this is really just being flagged because we don't have a loss run that came in with this particular submission. So in this case, this is obviously where we would need to go back to the broker, wait for them to send in that loss history, and then try to attach it. What I'm going to do though, step through a few more things before I address that. This documents tab will show you any attachment that came in with this email. This one's a bit tough to read. And then we also have the body of the email itself, along with, in this case, a slip that was included. The risk appetite will really highlight any particular risk scoring or priorities that we have created based on your guidelines. We can also seamlessly integrate with third-party solutions out there to really pull in some risk scoring. The users here can easily override anything if they wish to do so, and then you'll see the risk appetite change in real time here. And we have different categories that we can customize based on your preferences as well. Next, we have Ask My Submission. So this is a nice way to interact, really in a kind of a chatbot or co-pilot fashion. So let me go ahead and just ask it a question. What's nice about this is we can save these, we can create new chats. So if you want to really try to group together your different your responses and earnings, you can do that. We'll also provide citations to where where this particular chatbot found the content that was used in the response here. And then last thing here is the history tab. So again, going back to explainability and traceability, another really nice feature is that anything that's being done or touched within this or any submission will be logged and provided in terms of a trace back in this history tab. So you can see any actions that any user took on the submission will be flagged and then included in this history tab here. Also, we'll have a nice status bar up here, just indicating, how complete is this submission, meaning, when will it become quote ready? So in this case, we're not quite there yet, again, because we are missing that loss run that was included. So if I jump back to my inbox, and if we open up another one that came in, and so in this case, this was an email from that same broker that was including that additional loss history. And so just by opening this up, you'll notice that now our next best action is actually recommending that we associate this because it did find another submission that really matched some of the key different parameters that we've plugged in to help with that step. So in this case, I will associate it. We'll jump back in to the submission here. And now immediately you can see that it actually switches to quote ready. And if we go back to our documents tab that I led with, now you can actually see that second email came in that's attached to the documents area along with our loss history as well. So makes it very easy to keep everything in track, to keep everything together. That way you keep that submission on track. Also, that the required documents section that previously flagged our loss run, again, now is showing that that's complete. So in this case, this is quote ready. So we are in good order. And in this case, we could send to, I have this environment set up to send a guide wire, but we could really send it to underwriter, or really whatever trigger you'd like to have this perform, we can go ahead and do that. So we'll just send that off. And this will bring me right back to my submission dashboard. So this is different than that inbox. Just to clarify, we have our inbox and we have our submission work queue or dashboard. And this is a really nice way to see, how many submissions have moved beyond that inbox step, which underwriters or underwriting assistants are working on these. And then again, a lot of different information, including elapsed time, how long have these submissions been open and in process? What status are they in? Again, with all the same different ways to sort and prioritize your different columns. So that's pretty much it. A quick look at our new solution. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Jeremy.
Awesome. Thanks, John, for walking us all through that. Now I'm going to share my screen again, and we will get to the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Give me 1 second. Well, it looks like it's not letting me. Well, we don't need a slide for Q&A. We'll just continue on. So let's get to the questions for today's webinar. Tom, this first one I'll toss to you. I'm currently an Indico Intelligent Intake Solution customer. How would getting on board with the clearance and triage solution work from a technical perspective?
Yep, it's a good question. So the triage application, comes pre-built, able to ingest the data that you're now producing from Indico Intelligent Intake and port that into the triage application. So you go from not only being able to create structured data from unstructured input, but to actually use that for triage and decisioning. So that's something that we can consult with you on to get you set up with a demo account and take a look at it. The data that you're producing from intake would be able to power that out of the box.
Great, and I think a follow-up on that one, when will the solution be available and what does pricing look like?
So the solution is available in beta now and then will be GA in Q1. It is priced per submission. So it's X dollars per submission, depending on line of business, et cetera. Basically mapping it to the volume of submissions that you're dealing with.
Great. This next question, I think maybe Tom, you can add to this, and then Bill would be interested to get your perspective as well. Is this something that will replace a workbench?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think the workbench is a tricky concept in that there's no established definition for what a workbench is. The way we've thought about it is that this is the step prior to a workbench. The way that Indico thinks of workbenches is that's really where the quoting and ultimate risk assessment happens. That takes place sometimes within insurance platforms like Guidewire or other third-party systems. We've also seen, the workbench manifest itself entirely within Excel workflows. So we have some customers that are just looking for us to help them produce, high fidelity data inside Excel workbooks where they've already built macros that have the same kind of function that a workbench does. So this is not meant to replace a workbench. It's meant to provide an in good order submission for workbench type activities. But I'll let Bill also kind of weigh in on how he thinks about the concept of a workbench.
I think any tool that allows collaboration between underwriting assistants, operations, and hopefully at some point brokers is a component of a workbench, right? And I think thinking that any one provider is going to provide all of the tools necessary to enable that and then all the decisioning. So I think the concept of a workbench is fine. I don't know that there is actually a thing that would be an underwriting workbench. So I totally agree with everything you're saying, Tom.
Great. Yeah. Did we lose you, Jeremy? It looks like we may have lost Jeremy. Are you there?
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
The question was, I noticed a filter and sort capability based on priority and risk appetite. How is that determined?
So the risk appetite is generally something that the carrier has developed over time. They may be using third-party tools to do that. They may have developed that in-house. We see that as the carrier's secret sauce, right? That is their proprietary advantage, how they look at risk and how they rate risk. So the triage app is meant to integrate with existing risk appetites. You will see in the product when you have it installed that there's almost like a control tower metaphor where you're able to dynamically tune the risk appetite given your risk profile to help better triage and adjust that, almost on a daily basis if you want to meet your underwriting goals. But typically risk appetite comes from the customer and gets integrated.
Great. And how's my audio right now? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Another question, what capabilities are there for submission reservation processes where the first submission is the one that the companies quote?
Sorry, could you say that one more time, Jeremy?
Yeah, capabilities for submission reservation processes where the first submission is the one that the carrier wants to quote.
Yeah. So part of the clearance process is understanding, have you seen this risk from multiple brokers? Have you seen it in multiple regions? So you would be able to create rules within the triage and clearance app to decide how you want to handle that. Is it the first time you've seen the risk? Is it you want to favor certain brokers, certain regions? So what we found is there isn't sort of a single answer to that. It really is dictated by the particular carrier's line of business appetite and how they want to handle the sort of clearance step in the overall clearance and triage process.
Great. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our Q&A session for today and to the end of the webinar overall. So I want to thank our guest speaker, Bill. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, John, for being a part of today's discussion. And thank you for all attending today's webinar. Again, we'll follow up with the recording of today's webinar so you all can watch it again on your time and share it with the folks inside your organizations. But again, thank you for joining. We really appreciate it. And we will hopefully talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much.